interview of our compARTE Hispanic Heritage Month series. Hola, I'm Lizette Cruz Huarco, Executive Director of Diamante Arts and Culture Center. On today's show, we're joined by a journalist, food writer, cookbook author, food historian, a professional cooking instructor, considered one of the top national experts on Latin American foodways. Her career spanned more than two decades, and she has taught thousands how to cook. She is Sandra Gutierrez. Welcome to compARTE, Sandra.
Hi, Lisa. Welcome to see you and to meet you.
Same here. After so many years of seeing each other online, right?
That's right.
Sandra, can you share a little bit about your upbringing and how did you end up in North Carolina, out of all places?
So sure, I was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My father was getting his specialization of oral surgery at the University of Pennsylvania, and I moved to Guatemala when I was 5, and I lived there for 13 years. I attended the American School of Guatemala, so I had a foot here and a foot there, always my life being, a compendium of both cultures, American music, hot dogs, and tortillas at the same time. So that's just the way I was raised. I moved back to the States to go to college. I went to Smith College in Massachusetts and moved back to North Carolina originally in 1985 when my husband went to Duke University to get his business degree at the Fuqua School. And then we moved to Canada for a few years and returned to North Carolina to Cary in 1993, one of the very first Latinos here.
Wow. It's what, 30 something years now?
Yeah. More than I want to say.
I know. I know, but I've been here just about the same. So
yeah, I know you and I arrived more or less at the same time.
We were babies when we got here. Yeah.
Oh yes, babies with babies. I had babies.
No, we are both babies. So how did you start writing? How did you get involved with writing and even writing articles about food, and how did you get interested in food?
So originally I wanted to be a writer. That's what I studied in school. I went to become an English major. Being in Guatemala City during the years of the wars, all that, I thought I was going to grow up to be a war reporter, and I was going to be covering wars under bombs and all these things. Of course, as soon as I got married and got pregnant, I became mother hen with the little chickens, and I became the biggest chicken of all. And I thought, maybe not anything that puts me in danger. So I started writing about food in a very interesting way. I actually became a culinary instructor first while I lived in Canada, and I had a small catering operation up there. And when we came to North Carolina, there wasn't a market for that. Cary was really, really little. And I needed to meet people. And my husband came home one day and said, "You're driving me crazy. Please get a job, Sandra." And he said, "By the way, the newspaper, the Cary News, back when the Cary News was the Cary News, bi-weekly paper, big newspaper with a large advertisement section. They were looking for a food editor." And so he brought me the newspaper and he said, "Here, write an article and I'll take it back to them after lunch." And literally I wrote it on my little electric typewriter. We didn't have computers back then. We didn't have internet for sure. And I still remember my first article was on olive oil. And so I wrote this article and he dropped it off after lunch. And that afternoon they hired me to take over the food section.
Wow. So how many, did you have other people to you and stuff? And how extensive was the
No, it was the whole section. I had an editor over me who would see, but by the time I left, I ended up having 5 different columns in the section. So I was the food section basically. And I'm the one who started bringing big authors to the newspaper. One of the biggest celebrities I interviewed back in 1998 or 99 was Emeril Lagasse, when he was right at the peak. And my article brought so much press and so many people that there was a line around Barnes and Noble that went around like 3 or 4 times. There were helicopters. And the fun thing is I was in there with Emeril as he was signing his books, because he invited me to meet him. He had never had such press. That was right when he started becoming like a mega star. And
Right.
after Emerald, everybody wanted to send me their authors. So I started, interviewing a lot of authors, very big names. But I also had a column on how to cook with different ingredients. I had a column on food history, and I had a column on international cuisine. And of course, I had the Southern column that I had to keep up also for my Southern readers. But it was fascinating. I ended up seeing my readers. I still find them, people still recognize me. I did that for almost 8 years. And my picture was in the newspaper every week. So people would recognize me, and it was really sweet. I still love to meet my readers. It's been a wonderful experience. But that's what taught me to write about food. And after that, I started writing for magazines.
So let's say you start writing about food, but you're not necessarily a cook yet, or a chef. What was, how did you get, what was that little spark that brought you to food? Was there a dish when you were a kid that your mom taught you, and then from then on you're like, I want to cook?
So no, I say I'm always going to be a cook. I'm not a chef because I don't have a culinary degree, but I learned to cook from my aunt, who was a very famous caterer in Guatemala. So after school, I would go and help her, would do the appetizers and fix the small, trays of appetizers, etc. And from my grandmother, who was a very famous socialite in Guatemala. She had this beautiful home, and she used to have events every weekend at her home. And in her house, you would find presidents, ambassadors. 1 year Julio Iglesias came. I mean, you never knew who you were going to find. A lot of priests. You never knew. A lot of people of different political parties. Everybody came. But I was a very shy little girl. So, and they would make you go in, in Latin America, they make you go in and kiss everybody hello.
Of course.
Well, I went through the line of the 40, 50 people there, and then would run to the kitchen and hide. And all my other cousins and brothers would go play soccer or whatever, but I was usually the only girl there. And I would go hide in the kitchen, and the cooks there would say to me that I couldn't stay there unless I helped them out with something. So being little, I was given the little tortillas to pat so that they could serve little copetines or tiny appetizers, to pick up beans, to stir sauces. And I learned to cook. I grew up in that kitchen until I turned 18. I was there every weekend almost cooking.
Wow, that's a culinary institute education right there.
Yeah, in a way it was.
Yeah. So how do you go from writing the book, writing articles and stuff about food, to actually publishing books? And your first book was
The New Southern Latino Table.
The New Southern Latino Table. That's an oxymoron, right?
It's a very interesting way that it happened, because in 1996 I discovered a food movement. So while I was writing for the Cary News, I started talking to my readers. Cary was a small place. People were super friendly. And so, you found them at church suppers, you found them in the supermarket, lazy days. I mean, it was tiny back then. And my readers started approaching me and telling me about putting chipotles in their barbecue sauce or jalapenos in their hush puppies. And I started realizing that we were doing things such as using hominy instead of masa harina to make tamales because we couldn't find masa, or, adding collard greens to our empanadas because we couldn't find verdolagas, things like that. And I realized that there was a movement that was starting at the point where I was invited by this couple in Cary who were Southerners to their home to have dinner, and they invited us to a meal that represented both cuisines on the same table. And they had prepared a cabrito, which is a goat spit, roasted on a spit in their backyard facing the golf club, which was incredible. And then on the table they had tostones and Southern potato salad with pickles in it, and they had an arroz dish and macaroni and cheese, and they had all these things together. And I said to my husband, I don't think they realize what they're doing, but they're now combining both cultures on one table. And I started seeing that and asking questions. And in 2007, the University of North Carolina Press asked me to write the book on it, the entire book on the New Southern Latino movement. And so I named the movement the New Southern Latino Movement. And the book became the story of how it came to be, why it came to be, and why it wasn't Mexican centric. So you know how they try to tie us all together and put all Latinos in the same box? We're very different. In California and in Texas, the movement is Mexican centric because those were originally Mexican territories. So those were the first people who were there. So the cuisines, of course, have a very big Mexican vein in them. But in the rest of the South, there weren't any Latinos before. And when we started arriving to what was a very tightly seamed culture, I like to say it was very black and white. There was no in between, no brown, no Asians, nothing in between, no one else. So when we started arriving, we didn't arrive just from Mexico. We arrived from all 21 countries, and we arrived from all different economic and educational levels at the same time.
Correct. Yes.
So all of a sudden, you know, people were finding that they were using chimichurri in their pulled pork sandwiches. And that's Argentinian,
Right.
you know, and those things started to happen. And at the same time, as I was writing the book, what I tried to do is find dishes that were very similar in both cultures and build a dish that represented both cultures at the table. So in the Low Country, for instance, they have she crab bisque or chowder. That's a white chowder with a lot of seafood and vegetables in it. While in Latin America, especially in the area that was very affected or impacted by the Garifunas, who were the Africans in the West Indies that escaped to Central America, you find tapados, or tapus, depending which idiom you're using. And tapados are chowders. They're also seafood chowders. They can be done with crab or with shrimp or with lobster. They look really fancy, you know, with coconut milk. That's what thickens them instead of a roux, which thickens them here. And the vegetables are replaced by corn and plantains. So once you put them together in a bowl and you combine both things, and a Southerner and a Latino would sit together at the table, they would both recognize the dish with a twist.
Right.
And so the book became also my mission to bring people together at the table of two cultures and to say, we are different, but we also have commonalities at the table. And that became the new Southern Latino Table that came out in 2011. It is so far my most famous book. It's the one that has led to a lot of other things.
It's still in print. People
still
can
in print.
get it.
Yeah, people can get that book. It's still in print. My second book is also still in print, is Latin American Street Food. That book came about when the University of North Carolina Press asked me to write a book on Latin American cuisines, but I wanted to introduce them to all the different Latin cuisines from a point of view of fun. University Press books have a lot of history. I'm a food historian, so part of what I love is to feature the history of foods, but I wanted to do it in a fun way. So I have recipes such as the chivito uruguayo, which is a goat sandwich, but there's no goat in it. You know,
So what is it made of?
Yeah, there's beef. There's beef and there are eggs and there's the peppers and everything but the kitchen sink is in that sandwich except for goat. So why is it called a chivito sandwich?
You got to read it to find
out. Or why is the most famous arepa, which is the corn cake of Venezuela and Colombia, why is the most famous arepa named after the Miss Universe, a beauty queen of Venezuela in 1954? Things like that. So all these foods, which are very fun to make, they're even more fun to eat, you know, and that of course I feature tacos, but I feature that actually the cover of my book is a taco, but it's not the taco that most people think of, because it's a Costa Rican taco, which is topped with what looks in the cover. Everybody assumes it's queso, crema, and salsa, but it's actually ketchup, mayonnaise, and mustard. It's a completely different recipe. It's very fun. It's always surprising palates. And I taught cooking classes on these recipes for decades, also always surprising people. And the book goes from ceviches all the way down to ice cream. The most famous ice cream recipe in the book is for an avocado ice cream from Brazil, which is delicious. So again, it's breaking stereotypes to showcase to people that we're not all the same. Our cultures are not identical. And at the same time, we're all fun and we all have all these incredible things to offer. And that book has been a bestseller. People have loved that book because it's fun.
And you have a book that is called Empanadas, but is that one still in print or?
Empanadas is no longer in print. It's sold out. I think it got to 4 prints and then they sold out. So I just got my rights back. So I'm going to try to find a publisher to republish it new, because people are asking all the time, where's that book? Where's that book? It was a bestseller as well. So, but that was a fun book too, because that gave me the opportunity to showcase one type of food, the food that's wrapped in bread. So pies, right? Handheld pies of all 21 countries, and to showcase all the differences, you know, in the empanadas. Some of us make them with cassava or yuca. Some of us wrap them in plantain dough. Some of us wrap them in masa dough. Some of us fry them. The Argentinians make them with this dough that becomes similar to bread when you bake it, literal bread. And it's the easiest thing. There's no yeast, there's no rising, there's just mixing in a bowl and shaping, you know? So I wanted to introduce all those differences too, and make it fun, again, breaking stereotypes, but saying this is one food that we all have in common, but see how different we are in each country, that we each have our own specialties.
That's incredible. Oh, too bad. Well, please do publish that book again.
Let's try.
So you have a 4th book that it's not, well, yeah, I guess this is a little while ago, about 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, it's 2013.
Mm.
Yeah, and that was, or 2015, I think.
15. I think 15.
Yeah.
But you also published another book that year, right?
Yeah, well, both Empanadas and this 4th book, Beans and Field Peas, came out at the same time. And Beans and Field Peas was very special to me, because the University of North Carolina Press put together a whole collection of books. I don't know how many they have now, 35, I think, books in the collection. Each book, they're little books, and they're beautiful because each book is about one particular Southern ingredient, or an ingredient that's considered highly used in Southern cuisine. So there's one on rice, there's one on bourbon, there's one on pecans, and they asked me to write one on beans and field peas. Field peas being the beans of the South, frijolitos sureños, you know. So I was able to write that book, including gandules, including black-eyed peas, which are caritas negras in Spanish, all the beans that we're used to in all of the Americas. And what meant so much to me is that they had the top Southern writers included in the collection, and that they asked me to join. What touched me about that was that they were no longer considering me just a Latina. They were now considering me also a Southerner, and that brought to the table the new Southern Latino movement in my own life.
And not only that, an expert. It doesn't matter, not just in Latin American food, but just an expert.
Yes, yes.
Which I think is very, very important. I don't know if you know this, but you and I have something common. We both took part in the Gateway Portales exhibition at the Smithsonian Anacostia Community Museum. And can you, I don't know if it changed your life, but I know that it was a pivotal moment for me. Can you tell me how that experience and how it changed your life?
It did change my life too. It was a beautiful exhibit. I was so proud that we were part of that. It was one of the most touching exhibits I've ever seen on the impact of Latin Americans in 5 of the top cities in the United States. And that included Charlotte, Raleigh, and Durham. So it was a beautiful exhibit. It lasted for almost 3 years. It changed my life. The curator, Ariana Curtis, came to my house, and of course, she's now a director in the museum, Smithsonian Museum of National African American History. Yes. And she came to the house, and she chose the objects that she would take to that exhibit. And it presented the movement, the new Southern Latino movement, as a real movement. And it was accepted by the Smithsonian Museum and diffused throughout the world like that, as a movement that I had discovered. So that was an incredible honor, but it opened up the doors for me, for the Smithsonian Institute to pay more attention to my work. And in 2019, my life story and some of my objects were included in the permanent food exhibit at the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. And so there's a window there with my objects, and there are a few other things in a couple other windows if you look through. And that exhibit is right next to Julia Child's kitchen.
I was going to say, is it near Julia Child's kitchen?
It's right next to it. And it was very special. The night that they opened that exhibit, it was the night of the Julia Child Awards Gala. And they opened that exhibit, and I got to see and walk through the exhibit with Julia's nephew and her niece. So it was really touching to hear, you know, and they brought a champagne glass and we toasted, and her nephew said, Paul Prudhomme said, my Aunt Julia smiling down on us from heaven.
Oh,
So
qué lindo.
it was really special.
That's just an amazing exhibit. If people haven't seen it, it's like her actual kitchen. And it's moved and brought into the museum.
Kitchen. Yes, it's amazing. She donated it. So, and right next to it is the story of all the different food movements in the country. And we, the migrants, have our own table. Even though we were born here in the States, you know, we're still migrants. We're still, you know, considered migrants. It's very interesting. But, and then of course, this year, just recently, in the past few weeks, the Smithsonian Institute chose me or selected me as one of the top 7 Latina women who have made the most permanent changes in American culture.
Así se hace.
So it's changed my life for sure.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
It's
so yeah,
because it opens the way for all the Latina women who are following us, who come behind us, you know, that they know that if they work hard. I didn't become famous from day 1 to day 2. It's been 34 years of working hard and paying my dues and doing a lot of community work in Southern, and like my community, not particularly Latin American, but both. And you and I are both on boards, educational boards, philanthropic boards, arts boards. I mean, we've done it. The best way to become part of a community is to work for the good of your community. And I think that I think you and I are great role models for the women who follow, the Latinas who follow, to see that we can totally break glass ceilings in this country in a peaceful, great, happy, productive way if we work hard.
That's correct. Absolutely right. And it is important that our youth get involved in their community and see the community as a whole, not what they just have in front of them. Because sometimes we correct.
And not divided. We cannot remain, you know, Mexicans, Salvadorans, Costa Ricans on this side and Southerners on this side. No, we're now part of the same community, and our community, especially North Carolina, now includes a huge group of people from India, from South Asia, a lot of Middle Easterners, a lot of Vietnamese, a lot of people from all over. So this community, whether the people originally here wanted it or not, it changed. So what are we going to do about it? Fight about it or grow and celebrate each one of the cultures, respecting and maintaining the classics of Southern culture. You know, the movement, the New Southern Latino movement, did not come to replace Southern classic cuisine. I see Southern Foodways as a tree, and Southern Foodways has a lot of branches. It has the Cajun branch, it has the Low Country branch, it has the African branch, and now it has also, you know, the Southern Latino branch. It's only one more branch. The bigger the branch, the more branches, the bigger the tree, the bigger the shadow. But at the trunk, at the center of that, it's Southern culture, Southern American regional culture. And so it's a matter of how you see things. You can see things as divisive, or you can see things as growing and something to feel proud of.
We have a lot to feel proud of in you.
Oh.
So what's next for you? What are you coming up?
I'm very excited about my next project. It's a very big book. This is going to be about triple the size of my largest book. And it is being published by Knopf, which is one of the largest publishing houses in the world. It's Knopf, Random House, Penguin. It's all of them together. And it also happens to be Julia Child's publishing house. So it's very
Wow.
exciting for me. It's just an amazing opportunity. And the great thing about this is that Knopf has never done a book like this one, of that caliber, that is going to be published as two separate editions, one entirely in English and one entirely in Spanish.
Wow.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
Wow.
So that, another thing to help us Latinos find a sense of community, but also a sense of diversity.
You're right. So Julia Child been influential in your life?
Julia Child, I never met her. I was very few steps away from her, but I never met her. But in my life, she's always been present. I went to Smith College. She went to Smith College. Then, we have all these people that we know in common. The career paths, started also when we were both older. A great role model for me. And then the Smithsonian, and now this publishing house, it feels to me like I have a fairy godmother in her, almost. I certainly admire her. I grew up watching her on TV and watching her shows. I do not consider myself a Julia Child. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that she certainly has been an influence in my life. And it's women like her, like Jean Anderson, like Marcella Hassan, that have opened up the pathways for women like me to be able to introduce cuisines, like Natalie Dupree, who is the queen of Southern cooking, to introduce cuisines in a way that allows people to learn more than just putting recipes together, but where did the food come from? Why do we eat what we eat? How did it make it onto our plates? And the fun part of it too, because eating, for those of us who are blessed enough to have food on our tables, it doesn't have to be a chore. It can be a source of fun and culture and education and information.
And love.
And love. And love, lots of love. I always say, with a country as divided as we have, all we really need to do is open up our table for people to pull up their chairs. And once we eat together, we get to understand each other better and respect and celebrate our differences. Because if we're truly accepting of diversity, why are we trying to cancel diversity? Let's celebrate it. We can have commonalities and build upon our differences, because it would be a very boring world if we all looked the same, thought the same, weighed the same, talked the same. If everything was exactly the same, it would be so monotonous. I think of it as the Star Wars soldiers that are all white. I don't know what they're called, but
troopers.
Troopers. If we were all troopers, there would be no difference. I mean, nothing. It would be so boring. So I always think food is a great catalyst to bring people together. It is not in your face. It is not something to be afraid of. It is just something to be enjoyed and loved and to relax in and to get to know one another. And that's my mission. My mission is to bring people together through foodways and to let people be who they are.
Well, it's been a pleasure and an honor for me to speak today. And I hope that everybody out there goes out and buys those that are still being published, but hopefully those to come, which I'm sure there will be many, many. Thank you so much, Sandra.
Thank you, Lizette, for having me. I really appreciate it.
You can find Sandra Gutierrez's cookbooks at Amazon or any independent bookstore. Thanks for joining us. See you next Wednesday for another episode of compARTE. Don't forget to sign up for our Ofrenda workshop and home tabletop kit. Please join us on November the 6th at 7 p.m. for the 26th Annual Latino Diamante Awards. We will be streaming it live via Diamante Arts and Cultural Center's Facebook and YouTube channels. compARTE is a production of Diamante Arts and Cultural Center.